A pleasure to meet all at last. And so, if you had guessed from a certain post I made, a community post to be exact, on this channel, then you might know that I originally intended on making a lot more episodes to films I should have talked about years ago. But at this point in time, I'm afraid I do have to shift my focus on other things. I, of course, have plenty of other projects I can work on, so I'm basically making a cut in episodes. I'm going originally from my plan of 97 episodes to 79. And because we only have 3 more to go here, it might as well be time for me to cover a certain trilogy. A trilogy that is rather recent, and is still going impressively strong as of today. Here in early 2026, it's a bit hard to imagine that the live-action Sonic the Hedgehog is pretty much what we have here. It's also hard to imagine that the fact that they made this such a big franchise, it's really put Paramount on the map. Kind of like how with Marvel in their cinematic universe, Detective Comics in their own sort of universe, which has had some ups and downs over the years, but I'd say as of late, it's been getting a lot better. There was also the legendary Monsterverse, and we have ourselves the Sonicverse. I feel like that's what it could be called. But in any case though, originally, Sonic the Hedgehog, there were talks about putting it on live action a lot. I do remember in 2010 there was actually a Sonic the Hedgehog short film that they made for YouTube with some pretty unique CG put into it. It also was the time in which that Jaleel White, an original Sonic actor, actually made a return 20 years later. So, while I thought that that was pretty awesome, I was especially excited to hear when they were going to make a live action Sonic film. There were talks about it all over the place, like in 2015 and 2016 alone, with a bunch of release dates being scattered all over. It was hard for me to imagine that they finally had it coming around late 2019. But a bit of a snag came around. A little thing that they referred to as Ugly Sonic apparently set a lot of backlash, to the point where the controversy got so big, they decided to delay it for a few more months. We did not officially get our first Sonic the Hedgehog live action film until February 2020. And man, did it not disappoint. In fact, it was just amazing. With 2020, there was a lot of big films out there. I mean, you not only had Sonic, but there was also Call of the Wild, The New Mutants, Tenet, The Free Guy. I'm pretty sure that's what it's actually called there. And we also can't forget about Black Widow. But Sonic the Hedgehog was still a big film nonetheless. And what this managed to do here, it managed to re-implicate Jim Carrey in his well-known role as a comedian master. And because he was in the age of 58 by the time this film came out, it was hard for him to basically not make us laugh here. And it just seems like it's in his blood, his DNA, his quantum pinpoint particles in his system. So basically what happens here is that while the Sonic the Hedgehog lore doesn't entirely specify on what the original origin story is, there was actually a Sonic comic which originally had Sonic the Hedgehog and a doctor known as Ovi Kintobor, who would later become known as Ivo Robotnik. Yeah, the same name, just spelled backwards. A good scientist inadvertently created the blue, fast hedgehog that we know of, and even crafted the same kind of shoes that he's known to wear. So, as nice as that was, it was a bit sad to say that same scientist would eventually turn rotten like an egg after being let out in the open for too long. But what the film does here is go a little different than what we normally suggest. We have ourselves a younger Sonic by the opening of the film, in which that there is a adoptive mother of his, kind of like how with Ninja Turtles they had their own adoptive father, a rat if you will. But Sonic is given a power ring, which actually acts as a portal and teleports him into the Green Hills, which is, no joke, the name of a small town in northern United States. So that's actually pretty clever by the writing perspective. they translated the famous location Green Hills, which is well known in the games, and turned it into a wilderness extravaganza township for him to explore. Oh, but what's even more incredible is the fact that what Sonic does for most of his life. As he grows up, he creates himself a home, basically a burrow underground, and he gathers a bunch of unique stuff. There's a lot of things for him to do, there's a lot of activities for him to accomplish, and more importantly, there's always that little token of his that he keeps to remind himself of his former youth and his family. But overall, there comes a time where at one point, a police officer in the town ends up having his radar gun go off. The speed is off the charts to the point in which that it almost makes the gun itself useless. But after time passes, and especially when we get ourselves a good look at a man known as Dr. Robotnik, whom we of course later get to see is in fact the enemy himself that Sonic the Hedgehog will come to face. While it's a bit obvious for what it is, there are plenty of things that we have here to realize it's not the same Robotnik that we know of. He's neither bald, nor has his giant mustache, or has that crazed attitude of his. Because those of course will come in due time. But for the moment though, we have Jim Carrey being a lot more sophisticated, well polished, clean, and of course, stylized. In a way so that he's not very eccentric and is able to fit in just fine. There of course do come plenty of points in which that his unique technology does allow for him to find footprints which apparently interlink with Sonic himself. And while time does pass, and eventually encounters with the same police officer with the radar gun do come into play, we of course do have ourselves the voice actor of Sonic the Hedgehog, Ben Schwartz, to thank for the most part. And then of course there's also James Marsden, who plays Tom Wachowski, a man of course who is the officer of Green Hills itself. He does intend on going to a larger city, but when time does come around, and when Sonic himself is brought home, there do come discussions about certain things. Certain pieces that really make them feel like family. And we can kind of pin the blame on the fact that Sonic interacting with humans has been a thing for over 20 years by this point. I mean, in Sonic Adventure, Sonic X, and even Sonic 06, those might have been the seeds planted so that the idea of Sonic and Anthro Hedgehog coexisting with real life persons, man, kind of hard to imagine characters like those existing out here in the world. But then again, it's just a piece of fiction, so who really gives a crap about that? Details like those aren't exactly things for us to wonder or think about. In any other case though, heat starts to rise. Especially when Dr. Robotnik learns about the relation between Tom and Sonic itself. And eventually there comes a road chase, which as incredible as it is not exactly as fully effective as it is, but they still do a good job at keeping the pace up and also playing it to an extent where Sonic gets to have some catchy one-liners as well as some unique action between him and Tom that allows him to take down all the bots that Robotnik throws at him. Though unfortunately, it does leave Tom Tacoma in pieces, especially when the top gets ripped off. Could you imagine your pickup having no roof on it, or a convertible rooftop? I wonder if that should be a thing. A convertible pickup. Pick up a brand new Ford F-150 with a brand new convertible roof. I bet you that would sell like crazy. Well, of course, the battles still go on in spite of them making a clean getaway, and in spite of Robotnik himself eventually arming himself to the teeth so well that he does pilot his own unique Eggmobile. Yeah, it's basically that flying pod that he's been well acclaimed to, and kind of trademarked in a way. But here in the live action film, it's done pretty well, but again, the appearance of Robotnik himself, it's not fully manifested yet, but thankfully we will get a good glimpse of that later on. Of course, one battle does take place where Sonic is using the magic rings like crazy to fling himself to other parts of the world, and with Robotnik following him, eventually getting a shot at him. This leaves Sonic on the ground, helpless for the moment. Even Tom can't do much to help, it seems. But it does seem that hope is on his side. We do have Sonic getting a reminder from his former mother about what to do on Earth itself. And before we know it, Robotnik is thrown into a planet of mushrooms as the ring portal closes behind him. And while all of this isn't exactly as fancy and flashy, it really is a lot better than how it would have been if the director would have just stuck with his original idea of a live-action Sonic and of course made it its release for November of 2019. The thing is, the fact that we got ourselves a February 2020 release instead of November 2019 release, it just shows how much the career meant to them. It was more about the art and less about the money. It's pretty much like what we have in so many films today. There's always going to be sequels, reboots, and etc. And there's always going to be some crazy battles going on in the production and design of whatever film comes around. But in the end, filmmaking is art. I feel like that's just the end of it. It's not like how back then where it was just nothing but black and white stuff moving across the screen and actors that are possibly overacting. With today, they're professional, well-trained, well-acted, and well-suited for any set. Independent filmmaking especially is probably at its best by this point, showing once and for all the film industry can thrive even better today than how it did back then. Especially when the 90s happened. God, those were awful films. But in any case though, the first Sonic the Hedgehog film made itself a 2020 release, and today it still does have itself a good place for starting up a big series. A series that carried on for 2 sequels, with a 4th film having had its slate of production put together, and eventually will start getting teaser trailers and all that. For now though, I'll just be confident enough to say that the first Sonic the Hedgehog film gets a good score of 7.6 out of 10.1. So, while it's not fantastic, it sure is way better than what it could have been if it were just left in its original format. And with all the pacing, one-liners, and unique character design, acting, and event, even the soundtrack itself by Tom Holkenborg, 1 year before Godzilla vs. Kong, I will say, it's all well done. Lots of unique things to share here when it comes to Sonic the Hedgehog. But we of course do have a couple other things to highlight. There are 2 different end credit scenes, especially accompanied by a song called So I Run by Wiz Khalifa. There of course is the shot in which Dr. Robotnik shaves his head, has his mustache grown out on the mushroom planet, and he starts acting crazy. Pretty much the real Robotnik that we have been waiting for. They of course do imply that a sequel is among us. And at the end of it all, a post-credit scene where we do see another ring portal open up, Miles Tails Prower shows up out of the blue at the same green hills where Sonic is, also implying that a sequel just might be on the way. So of course, I will talk about the sequel itself tomorrow, and then the 3rd film, and those will pretty much be enough to wrap things up here. So make sure to like, subscribe, comment, follow me wherever you can find me, and stay on the Hollywood side for more.